has always felt like he's trying a little too hard. Remember when he was unemployed? He became Mr. Hyper Analytics guy down in his basement. Oh, boy. Then when he interviewed for the Cowboys job and got it, he said, I watched every single snap of the Cowboy games. He later acknowledged he didn't. And he got the job one time, and he was on Hard Knocks, and he had that really kind of cheesy thing, that long speech where he talked about high school Harry. Is always kind of trying a little too hard, and I don't think you can ever fool players. Now, he decided it was time for a team bonding event.
Which is normal. I mean, it's not a negative. I just think, young players, veteran guys that were resting, the different combinations. I mean, this is 6, 7, and 8 installs is always a tough stretch for your rookies.
I don't know. Last year, he smashed a watermelon before the Vikings game to make a point. They did win. Or was it the year before? It's not great. He also has mojo moments in practice. He calls them spontaneity mojo moments, where he cranks up sound from the Sunday Night Football theme and wants you to bring your mojo in the moment. I don't know. Am I being cynical? It just feels a little like guy trying too hard. Ask yourself this. If you're a Cowboy fan and disagree with me, if they played the Rams tomorrow, of all those boxes you check, do you think you'd win the coaching matchup? No. You would think you have no shot at that. You'd be praying he didn't screw it up. It's like I've always said about Westbrook. Westbrook's not going to make your team better. At this point, you're crossing your fingers. He don't screw it up with ball movement. So the good news for Cowboy fans, we know Mike's not great with clock management. There's no proof he has great game plans, although I can't criticize him because it's not like the Cowboys perennially start slow with him. They don't. Clock management concerns me. Late game execution really concerns me. The good news, if you're a Cowboy fan, you'll have an answer by about November 1st. The Cowboys schedule, they start with Brady and Joe Burrow. Good news, they get him at home, but they also played San Francisco at home, and Jimmy Garoppolo, and they didn't do very well in that game. And then they have to go to the Rams, to playoff Philadelphia, to Green Bay, and to Minnesota. So about Thanksgiving, you will have an answer for the Cowboys. I do think their schedule lightens up at the end considerably, but by that time, my gut feeling is, my instincts are, they will have lost momentum, and Jerry has always been about a year more patient. He was actually very patient with Jason Garrett. People wanted Jason Garrett out 2 years earlier. He was patient with Barry Switzer, more patient than many would have been with Chan Gailey. So I think you'll know. My guess is they lose to both Brady and Burrow. They lose to the Rams and at Philadelphia, and they lose at Green Bay and at Minnesota. They're 0-6 in those. I think it's going to be a rough year. I think if they can go, 5-5 through their first 10, you'd almost feel like it's a win. There's a lot of good coaches they face early. A lot of good quarterbacks. Save big in your water bills and get a 15-year limited warranty with Navien. It's with none of the bowl. So Tom Brady was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and he was talking about, I think we've all kind of sensed this with Tom, is that, he was Mr. Focus, Mr. Intense. Literally he'd take footballs and invite teammates with a supermodel wife the minute he won a Super Bowl down to Costa Rica. Like that is obsessed. I think Russell Wilson now, to me, is the only athlete in America. He's moved to the obsessed list. Total focused all the time, 24/7. Russell Wilson said during the time he broke his finger, he was rehabbing 19 hours a day. That is beyond even a driven, focused athlete. So Brady was talking about, I think it's a very interesting bite by Tom. Here it is.
Time went by, and then you just get super competitive, and I think I'm part crazy. I think that's the reality. 45 years old, and I'm out here with a lot of young guys that are trying to take my head off. And I see Aaron Donald work out on my Instagram. I'm like, damn, maybe I should have retired, because he's a beast. But, I had the appetite to compete, and it's going to be gone soon. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And I got to, just really appreciate what the time I have left, because it's not a lot.
And after he won his first Super Bowl with Tampa, I've never felt it's the same. And it always comes back to this. 3 words: something to prove. It's not money. It's not fame. After he won without Belichick, he was already the GOAT. We already said that. We spoke that into existence. He played that into existence. He's happily married, great family, rich, won. But he always had to prove something. It wasn't Belichick. It was me. So when he won in Tampa, did you notice last year he didn't bark as much? He didn't complain as much. You and I knew he wasn't happy around Thanksgiving. Joy and I talked about this on the show. It's like you can tell he's not really happy, but he wasn't as angry. He wasn't as pointed. Some of it festered. Nothing ever with Brady festers, ever in New England, ever in the first year. Something to prove. I saw this with LeBron James. After he won in the bubble in Los Angeles, he had nothing to prove. He loses, the next year to Phoenix in the playoffs. In the locker room after the playoff loss, he's like, I can't wait for Space Jam. Can you imagine him saying that 9 years ago? I mean, he would literally drive from the locker room home and start working out for the next season. And I think something to prove is a big deal. Now, Aaron Rodgers, after he won a Super Bowl, said, is this all there is? So for Aaron, it's not a knock on Aaron. After he won the Super Bowl, maybe Aaron's never quite been the same. What does he have to prove? I mean, he doesn't have the family dynamic, but he's like rich and happy, and he won a Super Bowl. And Aaron said at the time, all right, is that it? And I do think winning in L.A. and winning in Tampa, you're just out of the something to prove arena. And there's a story that's been fairly well documented by people I trust that Tom was ready to move into ownership last year. And it's one of the reasons I don't like Tampa this year, is that I don't think they're talented enough to not be focused. Because I still think the Rams want to prove it wasn't a one-off. I think McVay's got stuff to prove. I think he's got stuff to prove in division against Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco, who had his number. I think Stafford wants to prove. A lot of guys have won 1 Super Bowl. Very few 2 or more. All those losing seasons in Detroit, Matt Stafford's guy, 1 Super Bowl is not enough for me. And so I do think, I think that 3 words, something to prove, and it's an incredibly, it's not a criticism at all. It's absolutely healthy. I mean, what do you need now? I don't think Tom needs anything. And the fact that he can self-reflect and go, yeah, folks, he really, if he had the perfect scenario, would have been in Miami now in the ownership space. That's where he wants to be. Not as much on football, which you can't even think about 5 years ago. Forget 10. Joy with the news.
No. Turn on the news. This is the Herd Line News.
George Kittle thinks there should be more buys during a 17-game season. Recently told Kevin Hart on his show, Cold as Balls, that he thinks that they need to add another one. He said there's a huge physical toll, and 17 games is a lot. It's a lot of games with 1 bye, whether it's week 4 or the bye is week 11. I'm advocating for 2 buys. Now, this is coming from a guy who is obviously extremely physical, plays like his hair is on fire, and he also mentioned that he spends a couple $100,000 on his body every single year.
You know what? I think this is actually one of those things that feels almost like, why do starters play in the NFL preseason? It feels obvious, and it just takes somebody. I mean, this is something if a great player like a Mahomes, Josh Allen, Russ Wilson said, hey, I'm obsessed, and I think we need 2 weeks off. I think it's, and for the record, to extend the NFL season for you and I another week, if they play the Super Bowls mostly in warm weather or domes, what do we care if it ends February 20th? I mean, I think. Yeah,
I didn't like the addition of the game because I think that urgency is the biggest,
by far,
the jewel that the NFL has. It's built into the style of the game that every single game matters. The more games you add, the less of games during the regular season matter. That's the issue that many of these leagues are dealing with.
Yeah.
So I didn't like it for that reason. And obviously, when you talk about health, it becomes a big conversation as well. Now, the loss of the additional bye in the postseason affects how coaches can manage their teams during the regular season, because you would think, oh, if we have it locked up, we can rest some guys, but there's only one bye. So you really can't rest your starters either. So I agree with you. I think it will take the top level players pushing forward. Obviously, the NFLPA has to negotiate something like this as well. But this is also something that the owners should consider when they decided to make this move.
Like, if you look at the NBA, players are looking to shorten the season, like cut games. The NFL guys are like, we're okay with having another game. Just give us another week off. And to me, if I owned a company and my employees are like, I don't want to work less, can I have another week vacation? Yeah, for the growth of the company, that's a much easier ask than go from 82 NBA games to 68, where I'm like, I have contracts with cable networks.
Right. It's much harder to cut games.
Yes.
It's easier to add a bye. Now, obviously, when you talk about scheduling, like, it's a lot, but you have to figure out a way to do this if you want players to be healthy and available in the postseason, which is another huge issue that you run into with the NFL being a collision sport. Like, you've added an extra game. If you're not going to give players rest, it's particularly a player like George Kittle, I think, is a great person to talk about this. Like, he's a huge advocate for player safety, but he's also somebody who's not going out there precious. So he can tell you, and he's dealt with injuries as well. He's missed 13 games since 2019 with various injuries. Yeah,
he's an old school football player. Fans love old school football players that'll play hurt. We're just asking for another week off. I think it's the future of the sport. I think it's the future of all these sports. Spread the season out, more bye weeks.
More rest.
Yeah.
So the NFL gave teams 2 bye weeks in 1993 to extend the season for the new